There's some strange faces here tonight, I can tell you. I did a woodwork. Here we go.
We're standing here tonight at the launch of It Makes You Want to Spit, which is the book about the punk history in Northern Ireland. What was it, 4 or 5 years ago you put out the original book, which were photocopies, and I refused to do anything with it. And I absolutely hated all the lies and the untruths in the first book. But I must say that of the two people here tonight, and particularly yourself, you and Sean should be congratulated for the book, because I tell you what, the thing that I always felt that we have in common, and maybe if I'm wrong, is that first and foremost that we are fans. We've always been fans.
Why can't I be like any other guy? Why do you try to put me down? What do I care about the fucking clothes I wear? Why get your kids from making fun? This world's got a lot of space, so if you don't like my ugly face, it ain't me that's going any place. No, so I don't care. They laugh at me.
What was the motivating force for you behind putting this book together?
It was a book we wanted to read so badly we had just had to write it ourselves, because nobody else, no other sod was ever going to pick a pen up and do it, so we decided we'd have to do it, you know, and it's just a story that needed to be told, you know, and we need, you know, for too long there, England, New York, all these other scenes, okay, they had great punk scenes. No, we had one of the fucking best punk scenes going. You know, one of the last punk strongholds. And any time punk's talked about now, it's not mentioned. It's mentioned, or you know, they maybe mention Good Vibes, and maybe mention Stiff Little Fingers and Undertones. That's it. But there was so much more to it, and you know, we wanted to celebrate that fact, and that's what we've tried to do. I think we've achieved it. You know,
the original one you're talking about came out about 5 years ago. We couldn't get a publisher. We got a small grant from Antrim Borough Council, which enabled us to photocopy 300, I think, which it went down well. As you say, we weren't in it for money or anything else. We're just fans. We grew up with the Northern Ireland punk scene, especially the Belfast scene, Good Vibrations Records, Rudy, Outcast, and it was a big part of our early teenage years. And we just wanted to, in a way, just pay back a little of what those bands and those people gave to us.
I actually saw the book 2 weeks ago,
yeah.
And when I looked through it, it was fantastic. And for me, in one respect, to see a bit of graffiti which I had painted on the walls, Elvis is dead but Johnny Rotten lives, it reminded me of the spirit of the time. But I actually feel like I'm more punk than a lot of the punks that dress up and stuff. Do you feel that you're actually a punk?
I don't know what the definition of the word punk is, Thur. For me, you're talking about the hippie tales and stuff. I think punk is just an extension of, you know, the hippie thing that you went through, whereas you try to use peace and love to make things happen. The punk scene, that didn't work, and they turn around like, we're going to shout about it, we're going to shout loud, fuck you, you know, this is what we want.
Somebody said that Belfast was the most unlikely place that punk would happen. Belfast was ripe for punk rock. Do you think that's true?
I think it is.
Belfast was basically a wasteland in the 70s. I mean, and yet obviously the bombings and things. Nobody wanted to go into the city centre. Punk meant that people went in, did their own gigs. It was a do-it-yourself sort of thing. In London, punk was really just a fashionable thing, whereas over here it meant a lot more.
It's brutal all over England, you know, that was the era of the Yobs and football hooligans and Millwall fans and Stanley knives. And in Northern Ireland you had the whole Northern Ireland dimension as well, where kind of death could come very quickly and very loudly, and people became very bloodthirsty in lots of ways. You know, I remember my parents taking me to see bits of bodies of people who'd been blown up and stuff, and that was a kind of a weird kind of cultural tour.
People stayed in their own areas. Nobody came into the city centre. There were so many indiscriminate shootings, bombings and all going off that people just didn't venture out. The city centre shut down 6 o'clock in the evening. All right, Terry?
Yeah.
The ring of steel went round the city centre. You couldn't get in or out. You had to be searched everywhere you went.
I remember it being cheerless. I remember being grey, and I just finding everybody just kind of walking with a bit of a stoop and just not feeling enlightened in any way, really.
There was nothing happening for the kids. Any music was going was in the likes of the pound. It was all blues and heavy rock and stuff. And the kids didn't want that. The kids wanted something new and fresh, so they did. But I knew there was things going on in Belfast because we read the enemy. You've seen things advertised. Like the one that sticks out in my mind is SLF, Lamb's Lorry or something was advertised as. But there was no such place. It was a printing mistake.
Lamb's Bar up
Lamb's Bar, Newton Yards Road.
Yeah.
Right? But I mean, we heard about gigs in the Glen Mackin, Curtin Lodge and all the rest of it. But we were like 15-year-old schoolboys. We didn't even know where the Glen Mackin was, or the Curtin Lodge, or anywhere else.
But in terms of Belfast, I used to work in the club, Christian Brothers, Past People's Union. There was a couple of guys there who used to go to the Heart Bar, and when the news on the punk, they would say, "Why don't you go down, see what's going on?" And blew my mind, like, you know. I'd sort of lived in the New Lodge, wasn't too far from where the Heart was, but crossing that no man's land, you never done it at night time, you know, the murder mill type of thing, Shankill Butcher's territory. It was one of them nights, you know, shading myself. But once I got there, I just thought, it's incredible, like, you know, just the vibe of the place and people from all over the town, people you'd never met in your life, like, you know. So, and then just from there, it was all, the local stuff's where it's at, like, you know, because loads of bands and bands coming over, there was a real good vibe, you know.
For us coming up from Antrim, it was a real adventure. We were excited, but we were shitting ourselves at the same time, you know, because we didn't know what to expect when we got off the bus. But once we got in the Hard Bar, fuck, it was heaven, you know. It was just punk rock. Doesn't matter where you're from, but anything else, just let's have a few drinks. Listen to Rudy, listen to the Outcast, have a ball.
All of a sudden I just remember from being stooped up to being jumping around and just having totally unlimited energy and not being fazed by anything. It was a fantastic change, really.
There was a solidarity with all the kids that went to the Heart Bar. You sort of fought your way there and you fought your way home. Well, I mean, the Heart Bar was a strip club by day and a pub club at night.
Yeah.
What was it like climbing up those stairs at the Heart Bar, which looked like a fortified police station?
The Hard Bar, when you came up Hill Street, I mean, Hill Street itself was scary. Running into the Talbot Street, it was all narrow cobblestone streets, hardly any lights. You came to the Hard Bar, there's a big wire fence around the outside. There was barrels filled with concrete, there was intercom and all sorts of things before you even got in. It was like Fort Knox. But see, once you get into those doors, up the stairs, and all you seen was wall-to-wall punk rock. You know, as soon as you walked in, didn't matter where you were from, Terry, what town or what part of Belfast, what foot you kicked with or anything else, you were a fellow punk rocker and you were greeted, you know, what about you, mate, you know, going up for a drink and what band you like and stuff, you know.
There wouldn't have been any overt sectarianism, like there was no, you left your politics at the door, but there was people there, like, you know, I mean, in the book there's a lot of people maybe try and portray it as like, you know, nobody give a fuck, but you know what it's like, in any scene you get people who do give a fuck, and they were trying to suss out where you were from, and, you know, usual sort of stuff going on there, and it was under the surface. You know, a lot of people hadn't left their politics behind, but through time, you know, that sort of fell away, and people who got involved were genuinely just wanting to get something going, like, you know, and that's where a lot of the creative stuff came from. As far as I'm concerned, a lot of the creative stuff really kicked in later. You know, stuff like the Anarchy Centre and then Gyros and stuff.
How the hell did you get into punk rock in the first place?
Well, listening to the Pistols was probably the first. Johnny Rotten. That's a lot to do with just hearing the Pistols, seeing the clothes. There was a whole package, you know, the clothes, the bands, the attitude, the fuck you attitude. It was just the whole package.
But there must have been a defining moment in your life when you went, this is what I love.
I think it was hearing Holidays in the Sun with the Sex Pistols. That was it.
Holidays in the Sun?
Holidays in the Sun. It's just the voice, everything was so different. You know, Lydon's voice on the Flip, Seattle, played that, Satellite, sorry, played that to death, you know, and then I just wanted to hear more, and you went into shops like yourselves, and you know, you always had the 10p box, and you just took a gamble on these weird and wonderful sleeves, you know, and you come home with brilliant records, you know.
Well, it was actually John Peel that I first discovered him. He played the Ramones one night, 1976. I just happened to be listening. The Ramones were sandwiched in between the Blue Oyster Cult and Thin Lizzy. As soon as I heard that 3 minutes, seen as a punk rocker, that was me. Hook, line and sinker.
You were a wee Fenian bastard from the markets.
That's correct.
Right. Who discovered punk, which must have been a very difficult time at that side, because everybody I know from the markets were all stickies and all. How did you discover punk?
I went to Brighton. My cousins lived in Brighton. Turned on top of the pops, and there was Johnny Rotten saying "Pretty Vacant," "Destroy Cheesecloth," "Red Hair." I'd hated pop music before, and I went, "Yes, that's for me. That's for fucking me. I like that." And then the God Save the Queen, fuck the Queen. I love that as well. I thought that's for me. I came home, went to your shop, did a lot of shoplifting, took a load of your records. That was the best.
Brilliant.
But ripping you off, I loved
right.
that. You know.
First thing that got me into punk, probably like everyone else is saying here tonight, was seeing the Sex Pistols on Top of the Pops, or in the Daily Mirror when Johnny Rotten got his face slashed.
Rudy and the Pound, about 78, 79. Absolute mess, horrible place, dingy, but the music was fantastic. There was nothing else like it. Just the excitement.
I remember about a year and a half of my life kind of not really knowing where I fitted in, and kind of dabbling in kind of football hooliganism and liking kind of Led Zeppelin and things, but never really feeling convinced about it all. And then kind of punk rock came in, and I thought, well, that's my wee place. And I knew kind of very, very quickly, and I understood intuitively what it was about without having to read kind of great situationist texts or anything like that. And it was 3 or 4 years of exhilaration, and the rest of my life's kind of been sort of informed by what happened around that time. So it's there, and it'll be there till I die.
Punk was a fashionable thing in London, and it was seen to be a fashionable thing, but Belfast was perfect for punk just to happen. Do you think that's true?
Yes, it was. 2 things, Terry. It wasn't fashionable in Belfast. It could be quite dangerous. You could get your bollocks kicked in for being a punk in Belfast. You'd be accused of all kinds of degenerate things. But the difference between punk and across the water and here was it actually meant something. It gave people who didn't want to be pigeonholed, prod take, whatever, blah de blah. It gave them a chance to say, fuck, we've got another identity beyond all that shit. And I still think that's alive today, actually. I really do. You know?
Going to the likes of your shop, I can remember going up and, you know, ripping the posters down on the wall, coming back, you know, and you running out after. So, fuck, how the fuck's anybody going to ever see a band if you're, you know, because they'll not know they're playing. But you know, we were taking posters off the wall and running home with them, you know. But you know, we used to come up Friday, Saturdays. You went around to Smithfield, did all the cheap shops there, then up to Terry's, and you know, if there was bands playing, you went. But you always had the hassle of having to get the last bus home. That was the big hurdle that you couldn't get over, you know.
Punk, I think, meant more here than anywhere else in the UK or America or whatever. They did have their social problems in London. They had social problems in Dublin. We had our own social problems, but we had the Troubles attitude, which made a real big difference. And I think the Troubles give the punk bands here the edge.
Like the records, you put them on now, you listen to, you know, the stuff now, it's still relevant, still sounds good, still sounds fresh, you know, so I had to
Who are your favourite bands?
Well, my favourite locally, Outcast were always my favourite, you know. So closely followed by Rudy. They were the big two. Little Fingers doing Top of the Pops. It was, you know, every bit as good as when the Undertones did it. You know, maybe it took them to about 1980 to do it, but you know, it got so many other people involved back here. You know, oh, look, they've done it, we can do it. So, you know, okay, you can slag them off and all the rest of it, and you can say that, you know, they wrote their lyrics for, you know, by a Fleet Street journalist and all the rest, but they were still, you know, I think it was still good to see somebody coming out of here. You know, be proud of Belfast, be proud of Northern Ireland.
Single day. Well, I can't tell you if that rumor runs true. And tell me quickly, is it true? Every time I see you, it makes me realize the pressure's on every single day. Single.
Do you feel that because of Stiff Little Fingers writing about Northern Ireland, the other bands who followed in their footsteps didn't want to write songs about Northern Ireland?
You know, the people, that's this big debate goes on, you know, and the Undertones didn't, but, you know, look at that Petrol Emotion, you'll not get any more political band than them. And, you know, other bands touched, the Stargates had a track on their LP which touched on the, you know, the local political scene too. So other bands did tip their toes in the water, but, you know, there's room for both sides, there's room for escapism, there's room for the political side, but, you know, I wouldn't get, you know, it's not a big issue to me, it was all just great, like, Alternative Ulster, Suspect Device, great records, you know, so you can't hold that against them.
I think some of the songs were about the Troubles, and some of the songs that were consciously about the Troubles weren't that great. I think a lot of the songs were informed by the anger and the messed up nature of the Troubles, and anyone who came from here knew that. You knew the code, you knew the energy, you knew the body language that says we've been through this. You didn't have to spell it out, and you know, that was something that a lot of people felt uncomfortable with later. That bands were expected to make a statement, and not everybody had a statement in them. But the fact that they were making cool music was statement enough, I think.
All the punk bands in your label, Terry, how many of them sung about bombs and guns and all the rest of it? They sung about teenage things, about having spots, trying to get a girlfriend.
Do you not think that tonight is a bit sad, all these old people coming out of the woodwork and getting together, or do you think this is a brilliant thing?
I think it's a brilliant thing. Hopefully it'll kick-start something else. Hopefully some of the young people will come along and see what it was actually like, what it was all about. Maybe somebody in there will decide to do their own record label like you, and something else will start up again.
For a while I was getting cynical and thinking things have changed so much. Young people really aren't into creating their own stuff anymore, and they'll take what's dished out to them. But actually, during the closing stuff when Jared there was a real feeling of people wanting to do something and wanting to continue something. Whether or not that manifests as something that will happen, I don't know. But there's definitely, it's the same as when we were about then. There was nothing. Now, really, there's nothing either. And I think there's there's an impetus there, and there's a spirit that's quite similar to that all,
Do you think that actually punk in Belfast did change people's lives?
I would say yes, it changed people's attitudes. I mean, there were, quite a lot of the time, Protestant people would maybe not have met with Catholics. It wasn't the end thing, and this sort of got the people getting together, and they realised that everything was the same for everybody. So,
it really got people's imaginations going. And I didn't think about this till I seen people from other countries coming over and saying like, "You've got very little here, but what you have, you're making the best of it."
Glue sniffing and that. I mean, that would be the criticism of their elders at the time, that it wasn't a great movement.
You'll always get delinquents, really, and possibly for a short period of time that made it seem like it was cool, but I think punk rock saved far more souls than it ever did kind of doom people or lose people to kind of solvent abuse or anything like that. You kind of knew when punk kind of gave you a set of moral kind of dividers, you could suddenly realise that a lot of these things were wrong, and it was very easy after that to spot what was wrong and what was right, really. That was a great blessing, really, and without, it's again a terribly romantic thing to say, but without punk rock, so many young people would have gone into this ugly sectarian place, and they didn't. They went into rock and roll instead.
Step onto the stage, another chance to lie as you show us on your edge. Don't say what you feel, don't say what's on your mind. Watch them with the chances.